The door closing was the quietest sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't a slam. It was a soft, final click of a lock, a period at the end of the sentence that was my marriage. My own husband had just asked me to leave. Not in anger, not during a fight, but with the calm, dismissive tone of a curator removing an off-brand piece from an exhibition. My pregnancy, you see, didn't match the decor. You understand the necessity, Clara, Ethan had said, his gaze fixed on the slim platinum face of his watch, not on my swollen body or my eyes. The Japanese associates arrive in 20 minutes. The presentation must be flawless. The swelling, the waddling. It disrupts the visual harmony. He'd said it like he was noting a scratch on a parquet floor. He'd pressed a cold hotel keycard into my palm. The Grandiose Suites. Just stay there until you're presentable again. Then he'd turned, the heavy oak door, the one I'd sanded and stained myself, had swung shut. The lock had engaged with that tiny, devastating sound. I was not a wife leaving. I was an aesthetic problem being temporarily warehoused. I stood there on the poured concrete porch of the minimalist glass box we called home, the drizzle soaking through my silk blouse. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A profound, unsettling stillness settled over me. I walked to my car, the practical, compact hatchback Ethan publicly derided as a glorified shopping cart, and drove. The city lights melted into streaks of gold and white through the rain-blurred windshield, but my mind had never been clearer. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a termination. A severance package delivered on a porch in the rain. For 7 years, I had been the centerpiece in Ethan Reed's gallery of a life. Not a partner, but a living, breathing asset. A proof of concept. He didn't marry for love, he acquired for impact. I was the statement piece that whispered discernment, success, controlled beauty. People often asked why I, Clara Vance, former rising star in the contemporary art world, left my beloved gallery career the month we married. Ethan's public answer was a masterpiece of misdirection. He was a provider, old-fashioned. He wanted to spare me the grind. A romantic narrative. The truth was a clinical transaction. In the rarefied air of high-end real estate development where Ethan swam, a wife with her own career is complicated. It raises questions. Does he need her income? Is his own success not sufficient? A trophy wife, however, is a pure dividend. She is a luxury item that signifies the husband's wealth is so absolute, he can afford to keep a talented woman idle. I wasn't hired to be a homemaker. We had a chef, a housekeeper, a landscaper. I was hired to be a landmark. A silent, beautiful monument to his taste. I had mistaken his controlling eye for curation, his possessive grip for passion. I had polished myself to a high gloss, believing my value was in my reflection of his light. But a baby, I now understood as I navigated the neon-lit streets toward the mediocre hotel, is not a minimalist sculpture. It is organic, chaotic, gloriously human. It cannot be styled. By conceiving, I hadn't created a new life in our story. I had introduced a critical design flaw. I was a malfunctioning fixture. So, I was being removed for repairs. Yet, as I turned into the parking lot of the Grandiose Suites, its sign flickering pathetically, I felt no despair. Only a cold, focused clarity. Why? I killed the engine. The silence of the cheap car was absolute. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't consider calling a friend or my mother. Instead, I leaned over and opened the glove compartment. From beneath the manuals, I pulled out a prepaid burner phone, its plastic shell still shiny. I had purchased it 4 days ago. The day I had accidentally discovered the hidden feed on our home security server. The discovery that had shifted something fundamental, long before tonight's eviction. I was not just a discarded wife. I was a sleeping shareholder. And my husband Ethan, the man who exiled me for clashing with his monochromatic palette, was blissfully, arrogantly unaware of the portfolio he was about to lose. The hotel room was a study in beige melancholy. It smelled of industrial lemon cleaner and the faint, clinging damp of cheap air conditioning. I sat on the edge of the firm, synthetic bedspread, my hands resting on my knees. I looked at the peeling vinyl wallpaper, the generic landscape print, the humming mini-fridge. A laugh, sharp and dry, escaped my lips. The absurdity was almost exquisite. I could have bought this entire hotel chain. I could have purchased the city block it sat on and redeveloped it into something truly grand. Ethan, the man obsessed with the appearance of wealth, the aesthetic of power, was clueless about its substance. He believed I was Clara Reed, the gracious, uncomplicated art historian from a quietly respectable family. He thought my world was defined by his allowances, his opinions, his curated reality. He did not know my maiden name was Vance. He did not know my mother was Alara Vance, founder and principal of Vance Venture Partners, a firm whose silent, strategic holdings were woven through the very fabric of the luxury sector Ethan aspired to. He did not know that in a trust, untouched and quietly compounding since my 25th birthday, a birthday he'd surprised me with a spa day, he later deducted as a business entertainment expense, sat a sum that made his most ambitious commission look like a rounding error. $58 million. I had not hidden this to be deceptive. I had hidden it to be loved. I had watched the world interact with my mother my whole life. They did not see a witty, fierce, deeply feeling woman. They saw a balance sheet. They saw leverage. I wanted, with a desperate, romantic hunger, to be wanted for my mind, my heart, my hands, for the things no ledger could quantify. I believed if I came to the table with nothing but my own self, and someone chose me, it would be the truest form of love. So, I performed modesty. I let Ethan explain compound interest to me. I nodded as he held forth on market fluctuations, all while my own quarterly dividends from Vance Holdings silently eclipsed his annual income. I told myself this was noble. I was building a foundation of trust based
Sitting
on
in that
character,
motel room,
not the hum of failure in the air, I saw the devastating truth. I wasn't building trust. I was building a beautifully appointed cage. By making myself small, by hiding my power, I hadn't found a man who loved me for me. I had perfectly positioned myself for a man who needed me to be manageable. Ethan didn't love my simplicity. He loved my perceived dependency. The good wife narrative was just a set of gilded handcuffs, and I had been the one to click them shut around my own wrists. The woman I had pretended to be, the agreeable, polished, ever-supportive Clara Reed, was left on that rain-slicked porch. She had been terminated along with the marriage. The woman in this room, on this stiff bed, was done with performances. I reached for my bag and pulled out the old laptop I'd never quite stopped using, the one Ethan thought was for blogging. Its screen glowed to life, and in its blue light, I saw not my reflection, but my future. Strings of numbers populated the screen, a silent army of zeros. Ethan wanted to play in the leagues of moguls and magnates. He was desperate to sit at their table. He was about to discover the table was mine. And I was freshly, utterly Mativa. The first thing I did in that motel room was not cry. It was to log into a secure, encrypted server. Not the joint cloud account Ethan monitored, but a private digital vault. 4 days prior, a glitch in the sleek, expensive home security system he'd proudly installed had sent an alert to my personal email, not his. It was a master admin link, meant for diagnostics. A backdoor. Driven by a whisper of intuition, or perhaps the first faint crack in my facade of trust, I'd followed it. What I found wasn't evidence of an affair, not then. It was a revelation of perspective. I saw my home through dozens of angles I never knew existed. Ethan hadn't just installed a security system, he'd built a panopticon. The kitchen, the living room, the hallways. Every space was observed. The only blind spots were the bathrooms and, ironically, the unfinished nursery. At the time, I'd felt a chill, explained it away as his paranoia about the valuables, his need for control. I'd bought the burner phone as a private line, a tiny act of rebellion I didn't yet understand. Now, that act felt like prescience. With the clarity of the exiled, I knew what to do. I used that back door again. This time, I didn't just observe. I planted. In the nursery, the one room he'd left off his grid, I placed a single, high-resolution, motion-activated camera of my own. A nanny cam, ironically bought for the child he now saw as a liability. I disguised it within the delicate gears of the mobile I was hand-assembling, a constellation of brushed copper and pale maple. I synced it to a new, anonymous cloud storage. My digital tripwire. Then, I waited. The alert came 3 days into my exile, late in the afternoon. Motion detected. Nursery. My heart didn't race with nervousness. It beat a slow, cold drum of certainty. I clicked the link on my laptop. The feed loaded. The room was bathed in the soft gray afternoon light filtering through the linen curtains I'd chosen. The crib, its pale ash wood sanded smooth by my own hands, stood empty against the wall. And there they were. Ethan, in his custom-fit charcoal suit, and Lena. I knew Lena. She was a wellness consultant and influencer Ethan sometimes hired to stage his high-end listings with a vibe of vibrant, effortless health. Her entire existence was a curated feed of chlorophyll shots, Pilates poses, and #authentic joy. She was leaning against the changing table I'd restored, her manicured finger tracing the edge with a smirk. "It's so sweet," she said, the word dripping with condescension. "So maternal. Are you really going to keep all this beige?" Ethan let out a short, derisive laugh that traveled through the tiny speaker and felt like a needle in my spine. He was pacing, a panther in a cage of pastels. "God, no. This room is a monument to wasted square footage. Do you have any idea what a proper, soundproofed hybrid office sauna would add to the appraisal in this zip code?" But Clara insisted. He stopped and put on a simpering, high-pitched voice, a grotesque parody of my excitement. "The baby needs a sanctuary, Ethan. A soft launch into the world." He dropped the act, his face settling into its familiar lines of mild irritation. "She's been nesting. It's biologically tedious." Ted to reclaim my seat. Lena giggled, a sound like breaking glass. "It's kind of pathetic." "It's exhausting," Ethan corrected, his tone definitive. He walked over to the crib, the one I'd spent a weekend assembling with such hope. He looked at it not with paternal curiosity, but with the disdain of a designer surveying a flawed product. He gave the solid side a light, dismissive kick with the toe of his $700 shoe. "Look at the footprint of this thing. It's a monolith. Where am I supposed to put my new vibration plate?" "Seriously, Lena," he said, turning to her, his expression one of genuine grievance. "The kid isn't even here yet, and it's already monopolizing prime real estate. It's going to decimate my sleep protocol. It's going to ruin the acoustic balance of the entire upper floor. I didn't sign a partnership agreement with an entity that cries and defecates." I stopped the video. My hand was steady. I rewound it 10 seconds. I played his words again, isolating them from the noise of my own pulse. "It's going to ruin the acoustic balance." It wasn't just cruelty. It wasn't just the shallow vanity I'd grown accustomed to. This was something deeper, more pathological. Ethan didn't just resent the inconvenience of an infant. He resented its very existence. In his solipsistic universe, there was a single, luminous star, himself. Every object, every person, was a celestial body in his orbit, reflecting his light. A baby wasn't a new sun. It was a black hole, a tiny, demanding vortex that would inevitably pull all energy, all attention, toward itself. He wasn't afraid of being a bad father. He was terrified of being upstaged. My pregnancy was what the psychologists I would later read call a narcissistic injury. I had dared to grow something, someone, whose narrative would eventually supersede his own. I was no longer a flawless mirror. I was becoming a window to a future where he was not the main character. That's why I was a liability. Not because I was swollen, but because I was fertile with arrival. I watched Lena step forward, wrap her arms around his neck, and pull him into a kiss. Right there, in the middle of the room I had prepared with so much silent love. They kissed surrounded by the unbuilt dreams of a family. And I felt nothing. No hot spike of jealousy, no of betrayal. Instead, a final tectonic plate in my soul slid into place with a cold, irrevocable click. The last vestige of sentimental attachment sheared off and fell away into a void. He was not a complex man to be understood, but a problem to be solved. A hostile entity in the ecosystem of my life. And I had the resources to enact a controlled burn. He wanted to protect his precious spotlight, his curated silence? Fine. I would not just dim the lights. I would acquire the theater, dismantle the stage, and sell the land out from under him. I closed the laptop. The room was dark now, the neon sign outside casting a pink glow on the ceiling. I picked up the burner phone. It was time to move from observation to strategy. I dialed a number I had memorized as a child, but hadn't called for a purpose like this in over a decade. It rang once. Clara. My mother's voice was calm, but a layer of steel lay beneath it. She never answered with hello. Is everything all right? No, I said, my own voice matching her steadiness. But it will be. I'm not calling for a rescue, Mother. I'm not calling for a loan. There was a pause, the sound of a door closing on her end. What are you calling for? A business transaction. A hostile one. I could almost hear her shift in her chair, the CEO mantle settling over her shoulders. Explain. Ethan's world is a house of cards built on perception and leverage. I want to remove both. I want him to broker the sale of the Crown penthouse at the Summit Tower. Another pause. Longer. The Crown listing is $42 million. He doesn't have the pedigree for that portfolio. His firm wouldn't even get the listing packet. He will if he believes he's being personally scouted by Vance Venture Partners. I want him to think he's landed the whale of a lifetime. I want him to taste that 7-figure commission. I want him to spend it in his mind, to leverage everything he has, everything he is, to close a deal that exists only to break him. The silence on the line was profound. Then I heard the faintest exhalation, something between a sigh and a smile. A sting operation, she said, not a question. A corporate takeover of a single, overvalued asset. Him. Consider it done, she said, all warmth now replaced by the cool efficiency of a master tactician. Alistair will place the call within the hour. The Trojan horse will be impeccably crafted. Alistair, her chief operating officer, was a man of few words and absolute precision. He was the scalpel to my mother's strategic mind. He would be perfect. The call, as promised, came at 9:05 a.m. the next morning. Alistair played his part with Oscar-worthy restraint. He was the impatient, supremely powerful lieutenant to a reclusive principal. He conveyed in clipped tones that his client demanded absolute anonymity, moved with velocity, and required a broker who wasn't just a salesman but a lifestyle conductor. The deal was all cash, no contingencies, but there was a test. To prove his commitment to the luxury standard and his own financial substance, the broker must personally fund and execute an immediate, flawless staging of the penthouse to the principal's exacting, if vaguely defined, specifications. No reimbursements until closing. It was a liquidity test, a test of faith and guts. I didn't need the nanny cam to know how Ethan reacted. I could script it myself. He would have taken the call in his home office, initially annoyed at the early interruption, then sitting bolt upright as the numbers were mentioned. His heart would hammer against his ribs, a frantic drumroll of avarice. This was it. The validation he'd craved. The deal that would vault him from successful broker to legendary closer. His ego, a vast and hungry furnace, would do all the heavy lifting. He would say yes. He had to. And he did. The trap was sprung. Now, I watched the bait get swallowed, hook, line, and sinker. From my motel command center, I monitored the digital trails with a detached, analytical focus. The joint financial accounts, the ones Ethan believed I was too financially naive to understand, became my real-time ledger of his downfall. First, the liquid savings account we'd ostensibly built together for a future. He drained it in 2 transactions. $85,000. Gone. Next, the home equity line of credit on the glass house, which he'd taken out for portfolio improvements. He maxed it. Another $200,000. Then, he turned to his business. As a senior partner at his boutique firm, Crestview Realty, he had access to a discretionary business development fund and a company credit line with a generous limit. I watched the authorization alerts ping my email. He'd never removed me from the administrative notices. $50,000 from the fund. $150,000 against the credit line. He was moving with a frantic, greedy speed, believing he had a 48-hour window to impress a phantom billionaire. But it wasn't enough. The vague, grandiose stipulations Alistair had hinted at, art that whispers legacy, floral arrangements that defy seasonality, an ambience of unprecedented exclusivity, gave Ethan's imagination a blank check. He needed more capital to fill it. This is where he crossed the line from ambitious to fraudulent. Using his partner-level access and, I suspected, a forged digital signature or two, he initiated a short-term, high-interest loan against the firm's own escrow account. A desperate, profoundly illegal move. He took $300,000. Money that belonged to other people's transactions, held in sacred trust. He rationalized it, I was sure, as a bridge loan. The 7-figure commission would hit the account, cover the loan with a handsome profit, and no one would be the wiser. He was betting his career, his freedom, on the existence of my fictional buyer. In under 36 hours, Ethan Reed had leveraged nearly $800,000 of other people's money and his own hollowed-out assets. He was a man building a palace on quicksand, convinced the foundation was marble. I saw the invoices flood the joint email. A contemporary art rental firm for 2 pieces by an elusive Japanese painter, $65,000 for a month's rental. A famed floral designer from Kyoto flown in with his team and a cargo hold of priceless, out-of-season blossoms, $40,000. An exclusive caterer booked to prepare a single, untouched tasting menu to be displayed in the penthouse kitchen, $15,000. Rare, hand-sculpted ice art for the bar, $12,000. A string quartet from the symphony booked for ambient acoustics during the signing, another $10,000. He commissioned custom scent diffusion for the HVAC system, a blend called Triumph. He even hired Lena, paying her a staging consultant fee of $20,000, to be present and embody the vitality of the space. He wasn't just staging a property. He was staging his own coronation. Every orchid, every brushstroke on the rented canvas, every note of the absent quartet was a brick in the monument to his own perceived genius. He was purchasing the sensory evidence of his arrival. The sheer, grotesque extravagance of it was breathtaking. He was investing in a fantasy, but he was financing it with the cold, hard reality of stolen funds and catastrophic debt. The irony was so thick I could taste it, like metal on my tongue, he called me that night. It was late. His voice was a slurry of champagne exhaustion and unchecked triumph. Clara, he breathed into the phone, and I could see him in my mind, leaning back in his Eames chair in the now empty-feeling glass house, the city lights his backdrop. I'm calling from the summit. The penthouse. You wouldn't recognize it. I'm sure I wouldn't, I said, my voice neutral, a flat line. It's transformed. It's perfection. I've outdone myself. He took a sip of something. The client tomorrow. It's a next-level player. Private equity, old money, the whole nine. This commission changes everything. His tone shifted, adopting a magnanimous, condescending note. When this closes tomorrow, we need to have a serious conversation. About your situation. Your attitude. I'm ascending to a tier you can't even comprehend from that hotel room. You might want to reconsider this little protest of yours. There might still be a role for you here, if you can relearn your place. I let the silence hang for a beat, let his words echo in his own ear. I'm reconsidering everything, Ethan. Every single thing. Good luck with the closing. He mistook my calm for bitterness. Luck? He scoffed, the word dripping with contempt. Luck is the currency of amateurs. This is strategy. This is mastery. Get some sleep, Clara. Try to be presentable if you come by tomorrow. He hung up without a goodbye. I placed the burner phone on the nightstand. I looked at my reflection in the dark television screen. He was right about one thing. It did take a certain skill to dismantle a man without ever laying a hand on him. It required patience, an understanding of his deepest insecurities, and the resources to turn his own weapons against him. Tomorrow, I would demonstrate a level of strategy and mastery he could not, in his most fevered dreams, comprehend. I opened my laptop one final time that night. I reviewed the digital dossier I'd compiled, screenshots of the drained accounts, copies of the fraudulent loan authorizations, the inflated invoices, the nanny cam footage with its damning audio. I organized it into a clean, devastating narrative. Then, I drafted 2 emails. The first was to the State Real Estate Licensing Board, with the evidence of escrow fraud attached. The second was to the senior partners at Crestview Realty, with a detailed audit trail of Ethan's transactions and a note from a concerned stakeholder. I scheduled both to send automatically at 4 p.m. the next day, giving the closing just enough time to reach its spectacular, preordained conclusion. Finally, I pulled up the file my mother's lawyer had sent over. The divorce petition. It was concise, brutal, and favored me in every conceivable way, citing irreconcilable differences and cruel treatment. The attached financial disclosure forms, which I had filled out with my actual Vance-level net worth, were a piece of psychological warfare all on their own. I printed a single copy. I would serve it to him myself. I closed the laptop. The room was silent. There was no excitement, no nervous flutter. There was only the clear, focused stillness of a surgeon before a definitive operation. The theater was prepped. The actors were in place. The stage lights were about to come up, and they would be blinding. Tomorrow, I wouldn't just walk into a closing. I would walk into the ruin of the life I'd been living, and from its ashes, I would begin the meticulous, satisfying work of building my own. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Summit Tower. Its elevator opened directly into a vast, double-height living space, a monument to glass, cold marble, and jaw-dropping views. At 1:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the appointed closing time, the space was a silent, overstaged museum of excess. The rented paintings loomed, austere and intimidating. The bizarre, architectural ice sculpture wept quietly into a silver tray. The scent of triumph, a cloying mix of ozone, sandalwood, and something metallic, hung heavily in the perfectly conditioned air. It was the physical manifestation of Ethan's anxiety and ambition. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to the room, silhouetted against the sprawling city. He wore his most powerful suit, a masterpiece of tailoring meant to convey effortless authority. Lena was there, perched on the edge of a sofa so white and pristine it looked forbidden. She wore a stark, body-conscious dress, another piece of human staging. She was nervously checking her reflection in the dark screen of a turned-off television. "Stop fidgeting," Ethan said without turning around, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "They're late. It's a power play. A test of poise. Breathe. Look like you belong here." "I'm just excited," she whispered, but her smile was tight. "This isn't about excitement. It's about legacy." He finally turned, checking his watch, a different, even more expensive model than the one he'd worn on the porch. His face was a mask of controlled impatience, but I could see the faint pulse in his temple, the slight stiffness in his shoulders. He had bet everything on this moment. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of the Summit Tower. Its elevator opened directly into a vast, double-height living space, a monument to glass, cold marble, and jaw-dropping views. At 1:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the appointed closing time, the space was a silent, overstaged museum of excess. The rented paintings loomed, austere and intimidating. The bizarre, architectural ice sculpture wept quietly into a silver tray. The scent of triumph, a cloying mix of ozone, sandalwood, and something metallic, hung heavily in the perfectly conditioned air. It was the physical manifestation of Ethan's anxiety and ambition. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, his back to the room, silhouetted against the sprawling city. He wore his most powerful suit, a masterpiece of tailoring meant to convey effortless authority. Lena was there, perched on the edge of a sofa so white and pristine it looked forbidden. She wore a stark, body-conscious dress, another piece of human staging. She was nervously checking her reflection in the dark screen of a turned-off television. "Stop fidgeting," Ethan said without turning around, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "They're late. It's a power play. A test of poise. Breathe. Look like you belong here." "I'm just excited," she whispered, but her smile was tight. "This isn't about excitement. It's about legacy." He finally turned, checking his watch, a different, even more expensive model than the one he'd worn on the porch. His face was a mask of controlled impatience, but I could see the faint pulse in his temple, the slight stiffness in his shoulders. He had bet everything on this moment. The silence stretched, becoming a tangible thing. At 2:07 p.m., the private elevator chimed, a soft, expensive tone. The doors slid open. Alistair stepped out first. He was a study in gray suit, gray hair, gray expression. He carried a simple black leather folio. He did not smile. He did not acknowledge the staged grandeur of the room. His eyes swept the space once, as if taking inventory, and landed on Ethan. Ethan surged forward, hand extended, his broker's smile snapping into place. "Mr. Vance. Ethan Reed. It's an honor. As you can see, we've taken the liberty of elevating the space to meet the principal's expectations. We are ready to execute." Alistair did not take his hand. He let it hang in the air for a painfully long second before placing the folio on the massive onyx coffee table. "I am not Mr. Vance," he said, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. "I am Alistair Reed, Chief Operating Officer of Vance Venture Partners. Mr. Vance does not attend residential acquisitions." Ethan's smile faltered, his hand dropping awkwardly. "Of course. My apologies. The principal, then?" The principal owner of the acquiring holding company insisted on a final review of contingencies. Personally, Alistair turned slightly toward the open elevator doors, which had remained open. "Madam Vice President, the room is prepared." I walked out of the elevator. I had chosen the dress carefully. It was not black, the color of mourning. It was a deep, resonant emerald green in a fluid, tailored silk that draped over my pregnant form like water, honoring its shape instead of disguising it. My hair was swept back, my makeup minimal. I wore my grandmother's pearls, a single strand. I carried no folio, no pen. Just my own two hands, one resting lightly on my abdomen. I did not look at the breathtaking view. I looked directly at Ethan. The transformation on his face was not instantaneous. It was a slow-motion collapse. First, confusion, a glitch in processing. This was wrong. She was wrong. Then, dawning, horrific recognition. His eyes widened, his jaw went slack. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxy, ashen pallor. It wasn't just shock. It was systemic failure. The entire operating system of his worldview, where I was a minor, manageable app, had just encountered a fatal error. His brain short-circuited, unable to reconcile the weeping wife from the porch with the executive walking toward him. "Clara." The name was a hoarse exhale, a question asked of a hallucination. Lena made a small, choked sound, shrinking back into the sofa. "Sit down, Ethan," I said. My voice was calm, clear, and carried in the silent room. It was not the voice that had asked permission to buy organic blueberries. He didn't move. He was frozen, a statue of disbelief. What are you doing here? This is a private closing. You're a disruption." The last word was a desperate reassertion of his old narrative. I reached the coffee table. I did not sit. "I'm not a disruption. I am Clara Vance, Vice President of Strategic Assets at Vance Venture Partners. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, I am the majority owner of the debt held by Crestview Realty, which makes me, effectively, your new landlord." I opened the folio Alastair had placed there. I did not pull out a purchase agreement. I lifted out the first stack of papers. "This," I said, sliding it across the polished onyx until it stopped perfectly in front of him, "is a forensic summary of the $782,000 you have misappropriated over the last 48 hours. The escrow loan is particularly damning. That's first-degree fraud. A felony with a mandatory minimum sentence." The sound he made was not a word. It was the gasp of a man shoved into ice water. It was a bridge. The commission. I was going to replace every cent once the deal closed. "There is no deal," I said, my tone conversational, almost gentle. "Vance Holdings already owns the Summit Tower. We aren't buying the penthouse. We're liquidating a bad investment." I placed the second document atop the first. "These are divorce papers. You called our child a noisy houseguest. You called me furniture. You are a liability to my future, Ethan. And I am divesting." His eyes flickered between the papers and my face, wild with panic. "You can't. This is insane. I built this. This is my deal. You're my wife." "I was your wife," I corrected. "You terminated that contract on the porch. I am merely formalizing the paperwork. You are not a husband. You are not a broker. You are a tenant in a life you can no longer afford." I leaned forward, just slightly, my gaze locking onto his. "You have 24 hours to vacate my property. The glass house, this penthouse, your office. All of it. Take only your personal effects. The art, the fixtures, the ambience." I glanced meaningfully at the weeping eyes sculpture. "It all stays. It was purchased with stolen funds. It's evidence." I straightened up and turned to Alastair. "Security, please. Escort Mr. Reed and his consultant from the premises." "And Alastair," I added, as two large, quiet men in suits emerged from the direction of the service entrance, "have the nursery in the glass house cleared and repainted. Something bright. The energy in there is profoundly stale." I did not watch them lead him away. I heard his stammering protests, Lena's frantic whispers, the shuffle of feet. I kept my eyes on the cityscape, my back to the ruin. The elevator chimed again, and then there was silence. A deep, profound, and clean silence. Alastair cleared his throat softly. "The scheduled emails to the board and his firm will deploy at 4 p.m. The press release regarding Vance's acquisition of Crestview's debt portfolio is ready for your approval." "Send it," I said. The fallout was swift, public, and merciless. In the world of high-stakes property, reputation is the only currency that never depreciates, and Ethan's was now bankrupt. By the time the 4 p.m. emails hit, his professional obituary was already being written. Crestview Realty issued a termination statement before the business day was over, citing egregious misconduct and breach of fiduciary duty. The licensing board suspended his credentials pending a full investigation, which would inevitably lead to permanent revocation. The story, with its delicious mix of fraud, betrayal, and a hidden heiress, was catnip for the business gossip blogs. He became a cautionary tale whispered over martinis in the very clubs he'd coveted. He lost the Aston Martin, the lease was revoked by the dealership, which was, unsurprisingly, part of a network my mother's fund had a stake in. He lost the glass house. It was repossessed by the bank and later purchased at a discount by a young tech CEO. Lena's Instagram feed showed her at a retreat in Costa Rica with a new wellness mentor within 10 days. Ethan was erased, a ghost in the very city whose skyline he had wanted to own. I heard he tried to rebrand. He called it a pivot, a targeted sabbatical. But the city has a long memory for failure, especially a failure so theatrically orchestrated. Without the props, without the staged sets, without the silent, polished wife to reflect a glory he never truly possessed. The man underneath the house I live in now has a name. The brand of Ethan Reed was permanently discontinued. An old, slightly shambling Victorian on a tree-lined street at the city's edge, far from the sterile gleam of downtown towers. Its garden is a glorious, tangled riot of roses gone wild, lavender bushes buzzing with bees, and herbs that smell of earth and sun when you brush past them. The front porch sags a little on the left side. The floorboards in the hallway creak a specific, familiar song. There is almost always a pile of laundry waiting to be folded on the faded chintz sofa in the sunroom. Brightly colored wooden blocks and plush animals are scattered across the well-worn Persian rug in the living room. It is not sleek. It is not minimalist. It is not a showroom. It is alive. It is a home. And it is irrevocably, joyfully mine. I am sitting on that rug now, my back against the sofa, my laptop balanced beside me displaying the quarterly reports for the Vance Foundation. My focus, however, is not on the screen. It's on the warm, solid weight sleeping against my chest. My son, Felix. He is 6 months old. He has a thatch of dark hair that sticks up in all directions and a habit of sighing deeply in his sleep, as if contemplating the great mysteries of milk and naps. A line of drool is soaking into my cashmere sweater, a sweater I chose because it's soft, not because it's elevated loungewear. I don't mind. I run my fingers over the downy curve of his head, and a peace so profound it feels like a new element settles in my bones. My mother comes every Sunday. The formidable Ilara Vance, terror of boardrooms, now sits cross-legged on this same rug, patiently stacking blocks into precarious towers just to see Felix's wide, gummy smile when he bats them down. The CEO sharpness in her eyes melts into a wonder so soft it sometimes brings a lump to my throat. We talk business, but we also talk about sleep regressions and pureed pears. Once, after Felix was asleep, she looked at me and said, "I spent a lifetime teaching you to be strong in the boardroom. I regret I never taught you how to be ruthless in your own living room." I took her hand, the one that had signed billion-dollar deals. "You taught me the most important lesson," I said. "To always read the fine print, especially in the contracts you write for your own heart." I often think of the woman in the grandiose suites, sitting on that stiff bed, calculating her worth by the depth of her own silence. I want to travel back and sit beside her. I wouldn't give her a pep talk. I'd hand her a mirror and say, "Look, this is the face of the majority shareholder. Start acting like it." The revelation that crystallized in the aftermath wasn't about wealth or revenge. It was about the fundamental, dangerous miscalculation I, and so many others, make. We confuse being low maintenance with being high value. We believe that making ourselves easy to handle, convenient, undemanding, is a virtue. It is not. It is a vacancy sign for users. It is an invitation that reads, "My needs are negotiable. My boundaries are flexible. My light is dimmable for your comfort." I had a net worth in the tens of millions and a self-worth in the negatives. I believed love meant fitting seamlessly into someone else's blueprint, sanding down my own edges so I wouldn't disrupt the lines of their dream house. I was wrong. Love, real love, whether for a partner, a friend, or yourself, should not feel like being curated for someone else's exhibit. It should feel like being given the keys to a wild, open field and told, build whatever you want here. I can't wait to see it. Ethan didn't fall because I was richer. He fell because I stopped whispering and started speaking with the full authority of my story. I stopped editing my reality to fit his aesthetic and instead demanded a reality where I could exist, wholly and messily, as myself. The power wasn't in the trust fund, it was in the decision to finally claim it. To stop hiding my light so a small man could feel big. I am not low maintenance anymore. I am high standard. I am high value. I do not shrink to fit the room. If the room is too small, I find a bigger one. If the room is toxic, I buy the building and have it renovated. I do not adjust the product to move inventory. I ensure the product is so authentic, so integral, that it attracts its own perfect market. And so, to you. If you are listening to this in your car on a walk, while you're doing the dishes, if this story has echoed some quiet, unspoken truth in your own life, I need you to hear this. You are not furniture. You are not a staging piece in someone else's listing. You are the architect. You are the owner. You hold the deed to your own worth. The next time someone suggests your reality, your dreams, your very being is off-brand, or inconvenient, or too much, you do not apologize. You do not justify. You look them in the eye, and with all the calm certainty of a shareholder voting her shares, you show them the door. Sometimes, the people who claim to love us are not in love with us. They are in love with the ambience we provide, the validation we reflect, the empty space we conveniently fill in the gallery of their ego. Your task is not to make yourself fit. Your task is to build your own gallery, according to your own blueprint, and decide who earns a ticket to the exhibit. This story of quiet reclamation resonated with you. If it sparked a flicker of recognition or a flame of defiance, then you are already part of this community. And communities need a signal, a way to tell the algorithm that these narratives, stories of hidden strength, of psychological courage, of rebuilding from the inside out, are essential. They are the winds of thought that clear the fog and show us our true north. So if you felt this, do this one simple thing. Tap the like button. Right now. That like is more than a thumbs up, it's a vote. It tells YouTube to carry this story further, to push it toward others who might need to hear that they are not alone, that their quiet power is waiting to be claimed. It fuels this channel and allows us to dive deeper into the psychology of resilience, the architecture of self-worth, and the quiet revolutions that happen in ordinary lives. Subscribe to Winds of Thought to continue this journey with us. In the comments, I'd love to know, what is one small, firm boundary you will set for yourself this week? Where in your life will you stop whispering and start speaking clearly? Thank you for listening, for being here, and for choosing to navigate your own winds of thought.